Since I know that most of you are not familiar with me or my channeling, I'm going to give a little bit of an intro so that you all have a little bit of a background of how this started for me and what at least I think is going on here. This whole adventure began about 33 years ago when on two different occasions in the same week I had two very close broad daylight UFO sightings with some friends of mine. First time about 150 feet away, second time only about 70 feet away. Both times an equilateral triangular ship about 20, 30 feet on a side. And after having seen something like that, I was real excited to find out more about the whole UFO thing. Because I obviously, like everyone, I'd heard about them, but I'd never seen anything like that before. So now that I did, I knew there was something going on. And I began to do a lot of research into UFO books and so on and so forth. But back then, there weren't a lot of books on the subject. And whatever metaphysical books there were all kind of lumped together on the same bookshelf. And I just kind of like went down the line from UFOs to channeling to psychic stuff, whatever existed there. I just got curious about it all. And 10 years after the sighting, in doing my research, I was eventually actually introduced to a person who was channeling at the time. And I went and listened to them for about 6 months, and I thought, well, this is really interesting information coming through this person. And then the entity coming through that person actually offered to teach a channeling class. And I went into it not thinking I was going to become a channel. I just wanted to research it by being in the class, see how the class was going to go, and how something like that could even be taught. I had no idea how something like that could be taught. And so when I went into the class, it was about a 12-week course. And it was a series of different kinds of guided meditations and so on and so forth that just gets you more in touch with, more of your own consciousness, or however you wanted to use those exercises. But about halfway through the course, there was a lot of different kinds of things that had been happening up to that point that sort of were indicating that something strange was going on, but didn't really piece it together. But halfway through the course, in one class, while I was in a meditative state, I suddenly received what really felt like somebody just downloading a whole bunch of information into my head. And a memory actually came back of having made an agreement before this life to do this with Bashar. And I understood at that moment that the UFO had been shown to me on purpose to get me to move in the direction I needed to move in. And that the message that came in that one instant was, now that you remember why you're here, now that you remember we made this agreement, is this something you still want to do? It was offered as a choice. It wasn't forced on me. But I had to stop and think about it for a while because I didn't know if what I was experiencing was a hallucination from the meditation or I was just going wacky or what was going on. So, after a while I began to realize, well, the most important thing is not whether Bashar is really an extraterrestrial being communicating with me telepathically, if it is another portion of my consciousness. The point is that the channeling state is something that is natural to us, and whatever it is we access in that state does seem to have the ability to bring through different points of view and different levels of information that have helped people make positive, constructive changes in their lives. And for that reason I decided I'll just go ahead and see where the channeling is going to go. Very shortly after I completed the class, a woman doing one of the first doctoral theses on the comparison between, or the connection between psychology and channeling asked me if I would be one of her subjects for her paper. And I said, sure, let's see where that goes. And she invited me to her living room and said, I'll invite some friends over. They can ask Bashar questions, and I'll just sit in my big comfy chair and I'll take my notes and I'll write my paper. I said, fine. And the first week there was 5 friends, and then the second week there was 10 friends, and the third week there was 20 friends, and it just kind of got out of hand until we were doing it twice a week, 3 times a week, and then in 2 houses a week, and then we had to start renting auditoriums because it just went kaboom. And that was 23 years ago, and since then I've been really just sort of invited to different places all over the world. The largest session I think was in Japan, was 1,100 people. And I've just been doing it for the last 23 years wherever people have asked me to go. Bashar does present himself as an extraterrestrial consciousness. Again, there's nothing about this that insists you have to believe that he is. It's really just about whether the information works for you or not. If it does, great, apply it in your life and get the effect. If it doesn't, you'll get what you need somewhere else. But most people have said that when they do apply the information Bashar brings through, they do get the kind of positive effects that he basically indicates they will get. Bashar is actually not his name literally. It's actually an Arabic word. And I think it was the word that was there in the moment of that telepathic contact, but I don't speak Arabic. I am partly Arabic, but I don't speak it. And I think the reason it was chosen is maybe because of my background, but it was actually several years before somebody actually came up to me and said, "Do you know that Bashar is an Arabic word?" I said, "No, I had no idea." He said, I said, "What does it mean?" He said, "Well, it means messenger or bringer of good news." And so I said, "Well, okay, it's appropriate." So we use that to call him by. He knows in their society they're telepathic. They don't have names. They don't need names. But they understand that we need to call, people by names. And so he used that word. He'll use it as his name. And certainly just talk to him as if it is. If he is, in fact, who he says he is, an extraterrestrial consciousness, then what this is really all about is not only for the purpose of sort of helping us along in our consciousness and our evolution, but this is actually, from his point of view, the first stages of actual contact that will eventually result in literal physical contact with beings like him and other beings from other worlds. This is, as he said, how they do it. This is how they start. They use biological receivers, which are people. And they feel it's actually more efficient because we're already geared toward exploring other levels of consciousness. And so when we reach a certain level of experience, we kind of change our brain frequencies and they pick up on that and they start contacting back. They start giving telepathic information back to us. And for those that are either simply open to it, receptive to it, or trained to it, you'll start picking up on those messages and decide what you want to do with them. Obviously, I've decided to let it happen this way and play human telephone for Bashar so he can speak to you. When I go into the altered state, I don't need to do that to get the information from him. It just downloads instantly, and I've got concepts and so on and so forth. And I've done that. I did that with him once when I really wanted to understand how his spaceships worked and what the principles were and all that. I got like a 1-second download that took me 3 hours to write out. So for me, it can come that way. But the only reason I go into the altered state so that is what he can use my body as a translation device in order to speak to you. Because he's not speaking any language at all. He's not speaking English. He's just sending thoughts, and the language I was raised to understand, which is English, is what comes out. My brain just processes it that way. I've actually seen Bashar come through another channel in another country, a Japanese woman, which was very freaky for me to see that, and it came out in Japanese, but it was unmistakably Bashar's personality, unmistakably. So he has done that with a few other people at times, not right now because the agenda has changed, but that's one of the things that he did from time to time was help other people get started to channel other entities. But he has said basically again that he's kind of acting as an ambassador or a diplomat between our civilization and his, and that these questions, whatever it is that's important to you, is what he would really want to talk about. So even though this is a large private session, it is a private session, and in the public sessions he'll usually come through and talk about something first, but in a private session he doesn't. This is really your time, and he wants to make sure that you get in all the discussions, all the subjects, all the questions that you feel you want to talk about. So when he comes through, he's not going to say much more than hello and what do you want to talk about. So it's really up to you to start the ball rolling with questions and just take it from there and just talk to him like you would talk to anybody. For those that are not familiar with him, you will find that he is exceedingly direct. He is very playful. The more fun you have with him, the more fun he'll have with you. But he's very direct. And the thing that I kind of really appreciate about his information is that in the midst of all of the things going on our planet that people might call New Age, he seems to have a really interesting knack for taking very ambiguous or nebulous concepts that may be floating around and really grounding them and explaining them basically to the level of physics, to tell you why if you do this, this will work, or what effect you will get. So he's a very good provider of toolkits, because essentially he is doing this job to put himself out of a job. He knows that we have all the power. We don't need it to get it from him. But he's here to remind us that we have the power and that we can have the lives that we want.